Hi everyone. There's a few things I want to talk about today because there is a lot going on in this country that people don't know about that has to be addressed. We are seeing thousands of young girls being raped, abused and murdered on the streets of our country. We are seeing the most basic, fundamental human right, free speech, being attacked and eroded by the government, by the courts, by the various institutions of the government. We are seeing people be stabbed to death in our capital city every few days. 29 people this year have been stabbed to death in London. 29 people. How can this continue? How can we allow this to carry on? We have to stop it. Just a few weeks ago, we heard the horrific stories of what happened in Telford. But Telford was just the tip of the iceberg, because it's not just Telford where these girls are being abused. It's Rotherham, it's Rochdale, it's Oxford, it's probably the town you're in, it's probably the town I'm in. It's happening everywhere. We don't know anywhere that this is not happening. For all we know, this could be happening in the house next door right now, because this is such a big problem. But no one's addressing it. No one's talking about it. No one's afraid. No one's brave enough to stand up and say, rape is wrong. Whoever does the rape, it's wrong. Whether it's a Muslim, whether it's a white man, whether it's a black man. Rape is wrong. Why can't we accept that? Why can't we put a stop to these evil rape gangs? But it's not just the rape gangs that we're ignoring. I've been working quite closely with a group called Justice for Poppy. They are a group of people who are campaigning for this poor young girl. I believe she was 2 years old, and she was raped to death by her father. Now, the father has yet to be put in prison or have any punishment whatsoever because of what he did. And the reason for that is the police messed up in their investigation. 2 coroners and a judge, a family court judge, have all ruled that the father was the one who raped her and killed her. Her DNA was found on his penis after she died. Okay? So there's pretty much no doubt that he's the one who did this. However, because the police messed up, nothing's happened. And this group, they've started all sorts of petitions, getting thousands of signatures. They've written to their councillors. They've written to the MPs. They've spoken to the politicians from all across the board. And they've just been ignored. No one's listening to them. No one's accepting what they have to say. No one's taking them seriously. And I came along and I spoke to them. And I said, look, what's going on? How can I help you? What can I do? And of course, I'm not really that involved in politics. I'm not elected MP. I'm not anything. But the fact that I listened to them was such a change from what our politicians are doing and how people are acting. Our politicians have to get a grip and have to start speaking to people like the Justice for Poppy campaign, like the families in Telford who had their young girls raped and murdered. All of these sorts of people are being ignored by our politicians. How can this be allowed to happen? How can a group of thousands of people who are all signing petitions and writing to their councillors and MPs, how can their concerns not be addressed? How have the police not started this investigation again and arrested this man and punished him for the evil, evil crimes he's committed? Because they're too afraid and can't be bothered to deal with it. Telford. For 4 decades this abuse was going on. The police were told about it countless times according to all sorts of reports. So many different victims have come forward and said they told the police. They spoke to people about it. They told everyone what was going on. But no one listened to them. The police ignored. The chief of police in the area has said that most of the rape was consensual. Most of the grooming was consensual. Does he have any idea what grooming is? The entire point of grooming is that it's not consensual. You can't consent to be groomed and raped if you are 11 years old. You don't consent to being burned down inside your house like the story of Lucy Lowe. You do not consent to abuse. That is not how this works. And the fact that our police think that they can get away with this, that they can say these things and they can ignore this abuse, the fact they think they can get away with that and that they are getting away with it is a massive, massive problem. We have to stop this. We have to do everything in our power to stand up against this great evil, because it is a big, big problem in this country. Everywhere in this country is suffering from it. But that's not the only time that we're seeing political correctness attack people and cause these great problems. Political correctness is also allowing our most basic human rights to be eroded and destroyed by our politicians and by our government. In Scotland, the case of a man called Count Dankula. It sounds a bit stupid, but hear me out. He taught his pug to do a Nazi salute when he said the phrase, "gas the Jews." Okay? Some people found it funny, some people found it offensive. Like most other jokes. Yes, it was probably too far as a joke. Yes, it will have caused upset. But it was a joke. That's the point of the joke. The whole reason he had the joke, the whole reason people found the joke funny, was because you're teaching a cute little pug dog to react and do something horrific to one of the most horrific phrases you can say. That was the point of the joke. The judge ruled that context is irrelevant. It doesn't matter where he made the joke or whether it's a joke or not. The fact that he used the phrase was enough for him to be locked up in prison, possibly for a year, for a joke in the UK. This is crazy. It is absolutely abhorrent that we are allowing this to happen. It's a joke, okay? This is freedom of speech that's under attack. It might only be one person who's been locked up for this. But because of the way the legal system works, once one person's locked up, if anything similar to this ever happens again in a court, the same applies to them. And this will not stop if we don't stamp it out right away. People are being locked up for making jokes. People are being silenced because they're offending people. We have to stand up and defend our right to freedom of speech before it's too late. In this country, for hundreds of years, we have been a bastion of freedom of speech. Other countries around the world have looked at Britain and they've seen a shining light of what a country could look like if it enforced liberal democratic values like freedom of speech. But it's all being taken away. And Scotland is one of the worst places in that. But across the whole UK, it's the same. We're seeing all sorts of different opinions banned. Tommy Robinson, banned from Twitter. Katie Hopkins was apparently investigated by the police for saying that Pakistanis are linked to grooming gangs. Well, if you look at the statistics, there's strong evidence to back up what she's saying. But that's a crime. Am I going to be arrested for this video? It's very possible. We have to defend our rights. We have to stand up for what this country has always stood up for. The basic liberties that everyone in the country should have. That everyone around the world should have, frankly. That Britain always used to have until the last probably 5 or 10 years. It's a disgrace. We have to deal with this and we have to stamp it out. And the next thing I want to talk about. London, with our wonderful Mayor Sadiq Khan. What an idiot. In our capital city, we are seeing people stabbed to death every few days. Roughly, it works out to about one person killed every 3 days by a stabbing in London. Under Sadiq Khan's watch. 29 this year so far. In our capital city. How can this happen? How can we allow this to happen? Knife crime is constantly on the rise, and the mayor of London is doing nothing about it. He's found hundreds of millions to invest in, healthy streets and cycle highways and all this. And as wonderful as they probably are, they're not the priority. The priority is policing. The priority is people's lives. The priority is dealing with grooming gangs and defending people's rights like free speech, which Sadiq Khan is clearly an enemy of. That is the objective. That is what we should be fighting for. That is what the Mayor of London should be doing right now. He should be investing all of his time, as much money as he can, doing everything he can to stop fatal stabbings. Because surely, as good as a cycle highway may be, it can't be more important than people's lives. It can't be more urgent than people being stabbed to death on the streets of our capital city. This isn't one incident. This is consistently happening every single few days. How How haven't people stood up to this? Why aren't the Conservatives making such a big deal of it? Why isn't any other party tackling it? Because they're too afraid. Because they're worried as to who they might upset. Now, I haven't looked into the statistics at all. I don't know anything about who's doing the stabbing and all this sorts of stuff. What I do know is that there is a massive problem. And I know that whatever's causing it has to be looked into, and that the Mayor of London is clearly not doing that. Because knife crime has never been this high. Knife crime is constantly on the rise in London, and the Mayor's doing nothing about it. We're seeing so much go wrong in this country, and none of our politicians are tackling it. And while they're talking potentially great stuff about, say, the NHS, or they're doing well talking about immigration, perhaps, in some cases, there's lots of important policies they're talking about, but they're failing to address probably the biggest things that have happened in the last 10, 20 years in this country. Like grooming gangs, like abuse, like knife crime on the rise in our capital city, and like our basic human rights being under attack. Where's the outrage from our politicians? Where's the outrage from the people in the media, from the liberal elite, who are so keen to criticise Donald Trump for a tweet he sent out, who are so keen to attack Tommy Robinson for something he said on video 10 years ago? Where is the outrage at the fact that people are dying and being murdered in the streets of our capital city? Where is the liberal outrage that our human rights are being eroded and wiped away by this government? Where is the outrage? Because nobody is talking about it. Nobody is brave enough to stand up for it. And that is seen so many cases. So many different people talk to me and they message me. Like I was saying, the Justice for Poppy campaign. They've just not been listened to. No one's listening to what they have to say. No one's addressing the concerns they've got. And what we're going to see is we're going to see a people's revolution in this country. We're going to see people rising up and defending their rights, and defending the people of London from stabbings, and defending people from grooming gangs. Now, there's two ways that could happen. That could happen peacefully and democratically, like I hope it will, or it could happen violently. If the politicians don't act soon, I fear that this country could be swarmed with riots. And that is the last thing we need right now, but I think it's what's going to happen. What our politicians have to do is stop worrying about offending people. Stop worrying about upsetting communities or damaging community cohesion. And stop worrying about being called racist and start addressing the problems. Because the sooner we stamp out these evils, the more young girls we save from rape. The more people we can save from being stabbed in the streets of our capital city. The more chance we have of defending our human rights. And young people, like myself, think about this. Think about what you're doing at the moment. Because a lot of young people don't fully research what's going on. They kind of think, well, I don't want to be racist. I don't want to align with Tommy Robinson or UKIP, the evil racist people. But look at what we're saying. We're standing up not against ordinary, decent Muslims who are mostly good people. We're standing up against rapists and grooming gangs and murderers. Why aren't young people also standing up for this? Freedom of speech is a human right. It has been for hundreds of years, and it's under attack. Where are the young people standing up for this? Where are the universities, who always used to be the last stand for free speech? Where are the universities defending this? They're not. They're banning sombrero hats and tackling microaggressions, whatever that means. We have to start talking about the tough issues. We have to start listening to people like Tommy Robinson. We have to start listening to people like the Justice for Poppy campaign. We have to start looking into why people are stabbed every few days in London. We have to start talking about what's going on. Because if we don't start talking about it, it's not going to stop. Telford, like I said earlier, is the tip of the iceberg in terms of grooming gangs. I suspect there are grooming gangs operating in my city, in my town. I suspect there are grooming gangs operating in every city, in every town, everywhere in this country. They've just yet to be discovered. But they will be discovered soon enough. But whether the police will act on them, they probably won't. They haven't in most places. What has to happen is we have to go back to every single reported case of a grooming gang in this country. Every single one of them. And we have to investigate it, we have to speak to witnesses, we have to speak to victims, and we have to reassess where we've gone wrong. Because this cannot happen. Because even though a lot of these cases are in the past, the rapists are still out there. The victims are still feeling ignored. The people who've been abused are still not being listened to. And it may have been 20 years ago that someone was abused, but that person was still abused, and that rapist is still walking our streets. So let's go back. Let's look at what happened, and let's start dealing with it. It's going to cost a lot of money. I know that. It will probably cost billions. But we're spending billions on foreign aid. Do we need that? Probably not. We're spending billions on paying people to do stupid jobs in the government that aren't needed. We're paying, I think it was £600,000 to some council employees. Well, that's not needed. They can lose their jobs, or they can get a pay cut, and we can put that money into things that matter, like preventing rape. How does that sound? Controversial? Well, you'd hope not. Our politicians won't do it. And I can promise you right now, this will not happen, ever, under a Conservative, Labour or Lib Dem government. Because they don't want to upset people. They don't want to cause offence. They don't want to be called racist. Well, you know what? I've probably been called racist already in the comments a number of times today. And that's funny, because I'm not being racist. I'm talking facts. I'm talking about the fact that 29 people have been stabbed in London this year. I'm talking about the fact that up to 1,000 young girls were raped and abused and murdered in Telford. I'm talking about the fact that freedom of speech is being viciously attacked by our government. And those are all facts. And if you don't believe me, use a thing called Google, because it's happening. But our politicians, we have 650 MPs. I've heard one MP address the grooming scandal, and even then, nothing much has happened. I've not heard any MPs address the attack on free speech, other than ones who've said it's a good thing. I've not heard any MPs talk about the fact that the most basic principles of British history are under attack. And I suspect there are MPs talking about knife crime in London. I haven't heard them, but they probably are. But they're not doing anything about it. They're not dealing with our useless Mayor of London, who can't do anything about it. They're not dealing with the fact that people are dying and being raped and abused because of these failures. We have to spread the word on this. Everyone watching this video, give it a share. Send it to your friends and family on Messenger. Put it in your groups. Share it to your pages if you have any. Put it on your profile. Let's spread the word of what's going on in Britain. Because if we don't start spreading the word now, time will run out. Because every few days, people are dying. Every few days, people are being abused. Every hour, a young girl is suffering from female genital mutilation. Every hour. And there's never once been a successful prosecution for female genital mutilation, despite the fact that 8,000 cases happen a year, estimated. Only one time in the history of British policing has ever a case of female genital mutilation even got to court. And when it got to court, it didn't pass through. There was no prosecutions made because, for whatever reason, there was not enough evidence. The reason is our legal system is broken. Our legal system is aimed towards not being called racist, rather than actually dealing with crime, rather than actually tackling abuse gangs, rather than actually stopping people being murdered in the streets of our capital city. I really, really hope that everyone watching this video will agree with me that surely these must be our priorities to defend our civil rights, to stop the murder of people, and to protect against the abuse of young girls. Everyone watching, as I said a minute ago, please share. Please spread the word. Please send this to people in messages. Please like my page to keep up with the news that I'm sharing, because I will share the news when this happens, even if the mainstream media won't. We have to start talking about it, and I hope this video can kick off the trend. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you all soon.